It began not with the roar of cannons or the flutter of flags, but with the restless whisper of the sea and island people staring out at the horizon, wondering what lay beyond. From those windswept shores of Britain, a story unfolded that would shape the modern world. A story of ambition and conquest, of trade and tyranny, of enlightenment and exploitation, the story of the British Empire. Imagine it, the year is 1588. England stands trembling on the brink, as the mighty Spanish Armada looms like a thundercloud across the channel. But through fire, wind, and steel, the English navy prevails. That victory was more than survival, it was a signal, a moment that unleashed a nation's thirst for power across the oceans. In the centuries that followed, British sails would billow across every horizon, from the icy coasts of North America to the sweltering ports of India, each voyage driven by gold, glory, and God. Yet, beneath the banners of empire lay contradictions as vast as the territories it claimed, humanity's greatest advancements and darkest sins intertwined. In the age of Elizabeth I, adventurers like Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh charted unknown waters, raiding Spanish galleons, planting flags in strange lands, dreaming of riches and eternal fame. Their exploits carved the first rough outlines of an empire built on maritime daring and ruthless determination. Then came the merchants, the East India Company, the Virginia Company, corporate empires before corporations even had names, turning trade into domination. Spices, silk, and sugar flowed into London, transforming it from a muddy medieval capital into the beating heart of a global network of power. But those treasures were not freely given, they were extracted, enforced, bought with blood. As the 17th century unfolded, colonies multiplied. The sun rose on English outposts in the Caribbean, where enslaved Africans toiled on sugar plantations under the lash. In America, settlers carved towns from wilderness, pushing native peoples to the margins of their own lands. Yet in London, the empire's champions spoke of civilization and commerce, blind to the contradictions of their creed. By the 18th century, the British Empire had become an empire of trade and naval supremacy. The Royal Navy was its spine, its empire of ports and coaling stations stretching from Gibraltar to Calcutta. From the Cape of Good Hope to the Caribbean seas, Britain's merchants and admirals ruled not only through firepower but through financial cunning, weaving a global web of markets that tied continents together. Yet, as power grew, so too did resistance. In 1776, a group of colonies in North America rebelled, rejecting taxation and monarchy alike, declaring independence from the empire that had birthed them. The loss of the American colonies was a wound to British pride, but it did not cripple the empire. Instead, it redirected its gaze eastward, toward the vastness of Asia. There, in the Indian subcontinent, the British East India Company became a nation unto itself, its soldiers, clerks, and merchants ruling over millions, blending bureaucracy with brutality. After the Battle of Plassey in 1757, Britain's grip on India tightened, and soon Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras stood as glittering jewels in the imperial crown. The company drained India's wealth while claiming to bring order and progress. Its rule marked by famines, fortunes, and an ever-deepening arrogance. By the early 19th century, the British Empire stood at its zenith of ambition, expanding into Africa, Australasia, and the Pacific. Explorers mapped uncharted lands, missionaries spread their faith, and soldiers planted the Union Jack wherever their boots could tread. To Victorians, empire was destiny, a moral mission, a divine calling to civilize the savage and modernize the backward. Yet, behind that noble mask lay the machinery of exploitation, the extraction of resources, the control of trade routes, the reshaping of entire societies to serve British interests. The Industrial Revolution turned Britain into the workshop of the world, and the empire its marketplace. Cotton from India fed Manchester's mills. Coal and iron built ships that carried imperial might across the seas. Steamships and telegraphs stitched the empire together, compressing the globe into a network of control, its heartbeat pulsing from London. By the late 19th century, the phrase "the empire on which the sun never sets" was no exaggeration. Queen Victoria reigned over a quarter of the planet's land and population. But even as Britain's imperial banners flew proudly, cracks began to show beneath the surface. In Ireland, rebellion brewed against centuries of domination. In India, voices of resistance rose, from soldiers who mutinied in 1857 to reformers and intellectuals who dreamed of self-rule. In Africa, Britain's scramble for territory led to brutal wars with the Zulu, the Boers, and countless indigenous peoples who refused to bow quietly. Yet, empire was also a paradox. It built railways, schools, and legal systems, even as it destroyed traditions, languages, and identities. It proclaimed freedom, even as it trafficked in subjugation. The 20th century would prove the empire's ultimate test. When the guns of August 1914 thundered across Europe, Britain called upon its empire for aid, and from the fields of Punjab to the coasts of Australia, from the Caribbean to Canada, men answered that call. They fought and died in distant trenches for a mother country many had never seen. The First World War left Britain victorious but exhausted, its economy strained, its moral authority shaken. The empire's subjects, who had sacrificed so much, began to ask, if we can fight for freedom, why can't we have it ourselves? In the interwar years, independence movements grew louder. Gandhi's call for non-violent resistance in India inspired millions, while nationalist movements stirred in Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. The empire's administrators tried reform and repression in equal measure, but the tide of change was unstoppable. Then came the Second World War, a conflict that demanded everything Britain had left. Once again, the empire rallied, providing soldiers, resources, and hope in humanity's darkest hour. When victory came in 1945, it was clear that the world had changed forever. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, and Britain's empire, once the center of global power, found itself standing in the shadow of its own past. The wave of decolonization that followed was as swift as it was inevitable. In 1947, India achieved independence, the jewel slipping from the crown, followed by Pakistan, Ceylon, and Burma. In Africa, one nation after another reclaimed its sovereignty through struggle and perseverance. The British Empire, which had once seemed eternal, now dissolved into history, leaving behind a commonwealth of nations, an echo of empire, built on cooperation rather than conquest. Yet the legacy of that empire is everywhere, still shaping our world today. The English language binds continents together. British law underpins countless legal systems, and the scars of colonization, economic inequality, cultural dislocation, racial divisions remain vivid reminders of its reach. To some, the empire brought progress, unity, and innovation. To others, it brought suffering, exploitation, and loss. Both are true, bound together like the two faces of Janus, inseparable and forever intertwined. The empire was not a single story, it was millions of stories, of conquerors and conquered, traders and slaves, dreamers and dissenters. It was the story of human ambition stretched to its limits, of how power can build and destroy in the same breath. Today, as we look back at that vast and complicated history, we must see it clearly, not as a tale of simple glory or shame, but as a mirror reflecting both the heights of human achievement and the depths of human greed. The British Empire began with a whisper and ended with a sigh, but its echoes still resound in every corner of the globe, in the languages we speak, the systems we live under, and the nations we inhabit. It is the story of an island that conquered the world and then lost it, of an empire that believed it could rule forever, only to discover that no power, however mighty, can outlast time itself. The sea that once carried British ships to distant shores now carries memories instead, of triumph and tragedy, of discovery and domination, of the empire that once claimed the world as its own, and of the world that, in the end, claimed it back.